Hello and welcome to another episode of Crazy About Fly Fishing. Today we're going to be talking all about the knots, rigs and flies that I use for fly fishing for trout in New Zealand. Now that's because I don't have any fishing content today, well because we're in lockdown in New Zealand and I'm not allowed to leave the house. So we got to do what we got to do, so let's have a chat about these things. Let's talk about the rigs. The two main rigs that I use personally in New Zealand is a dry dropper rig and a double nymph rig with an indicator. So let's look at how those are constructed. Here's my leader material. So I basically have two lots, fluorocarbon and nylon. I have both in 8, 6 and sometimes 4 pound. I think that relates to 3x, 4x and 5x. So that's what I use mainly to construct my rigs. For the dry dropper rig, and whenever I'm fishing with dry flies, I generally tend to start with a tapered leader. The tapered leaders I use are normally nylon and they're 9 foot and taper down to 3x. Onto the tapered leader, I'll then attach another section of tippet to the fly, normally about a foot or 2 feet. And that's normally around the 8 pound or 6 pound mark, depending on the water I'm fishing and how shy the fish are. I'll generally use nylon for when I'm fishing with dry flies because the fluorocarbon tends to sink. So you're generally better off with nylon to keep your dry fly on the surface. From that goes to the dry fly. Most of the time the dry fly is a royal wolf. From the dry fly I'll then have a piece of tippet material going to the nymph, generally about 4 or 6 pound, and the nymph can be a small bead-headed flashback pheasant tail or a small gold bead heron copper. Size 14 or 16 is ideal. And that's generally for fishing shallow water and for fish that I'm sight fishing to. My second rig that I generally use for fishing deeper, faster water is a double nymph rig with an indicator setup. My double nymph rig generally starts with a 9 to 12 foot section of level fluorocarbon, generally 8 pound, and that I attach straight to the fly, and I put an indicator on which I can easily move up and down. For the double nymph rig, I start with a level section of 8 pound fluorocarbon, generally between 9 to 12 foot depending on the depth of the water. Remembering that you need to get your fly down, your leader length must be at least 1.5 times the depth of the water. Then from that fly I tie off the hook bend, I tie generally another foot of 6 pound fluorocarbon to my second nymph, which is generally a smaller beaded flashback pheasant tail or gold bead heron copper, size 14 or 16, which is ideal. For indicators I generally use yarn or sheep's wool indicators, and that you can either attach with the tube system of the New Zealand strike indicator system, or you can just do a simple loop and loop it into your leader material. And I'll generally use a bit of floatant onto the strike indicator to help it float as well. So that's my two main rigs that I use for fly fishing in New Zealand. Now when it comes to flies, I generally carry only one fly box if I'm going onto a river, and that is the box there. I've bought this CNF design box years ago and I still have it. So on the left I've got all my nymphs, and on the right I've got mainly my dries, and yeah, that's what I use mainly. So in terms of the flies I use, for my point fly that's either under a dry or the smaller fly on a nymph, it's almost always a size 14 or 16 flashback pheasant tail or a heron copper, generally a gold bead heron copper, size 14 or 16. Ideal flies, perfect for New Zealand conditions, love those flies. When it comes to my heavier flies in the nymph rigs, I have varied over the years. One option is a heavy heron copper with a gold bead or a black bead. That's a very standard one. If you use that, then you use the pheasant tail as the point fly. Very good rig. But lately I've been tying some varieties of flies that are a little bit different. And of those, this pattern has been working extremely well for me. It's essentially a large rubber-legged flashback pheasant tail, except I generally use hare's fur or something like that to use for the thorax. Yeah, it's a flashback pheasant tail with a gold bead and rubber legs. That's essentially what it is. I don't have a name. It's a size 10 with a big tungsten bead, even a few wraps of lead underneath. You can do it in a gold bead version, or you can do it in a a black bead version. Both of these flies have accounted for a huge number of fish, sometimes even more than the point fly. Been very effective this season for me, both these versions of this fly. Another fly that's come to work really well for me is kind of a botched version of the Category 3's 101 fly. I sort of tried to tie that in one of my Friday Fly Day videos. It didn't work that well, but I ended up with a heavy pattern that's actually been really successful for me, especially if you watch the latest video of fishing on the Nongata. I did really well on this pattern. I don't really have a name for it, but you know, you can check out the video of how I tie this one, and same with the other ones as well. Very effective fly for the heavy fly. Again, you can tie that with vary the sizes and colors of the beads, and you can put lead wire underneath if you need to as well to make it even heavier. So that's basically my first choice nymphs. I sometimes will do something else. Might use this home tied pole positions of from Category 3, or anyway, there's a bunch of other things, but the majority of things in my box is either heron copper or pheasant tail or something similar to that. That's pretty much what I use in terms of nymphs. When it comes to the winter here, and you're going to fish that are moving up for spawning in the Rotorua and the Taupo fisheries, it's very popular over winter here, then you're going to be needing an egg pattern. For egg patterns, you can't go past the trusty glow bug, although I must say, in the last couple of seasons, I've moved away from glow bugs and I've moved to these Otter's soft milking eggs. They're a fantastically effective pattern in the winter, and yeah, I've been using them quite a bit, and I've been working on a few variations of them as well. In the winter time, these egg patterns will replace my point fly on my double nymph rig, and I'll go really heavy and quite deep. In a dry dropper rig, I'm almost always going to start with the trusty Royal Wolf. That's just my go-to pattern for this. I love the Royal Wolf as a dry dropper fly. It's a fantastic pattern. The Royal Wolf I tend to fish in a size 10 or size 12. If I'm just fishing a dry to fussy fish, it will be a parachute style fly, generally a parachute Adams or something similar, in a size 14 or 16. Then of course, when the big stuff is out, I love to fish my cicada pattern. That's a great combo for a dry dropper as well, and you've seen a few videos that I've got some good fish on the cicada pattern as well. So that is a great option for faster water as well. It's nice and floaty. So yeah, it's a great pattern for a dry dropper rig as well. So when talking about rigs, you have to talk about knots. And there's essentially three knots that I use to put these rigs together. The first one is the knot to the fly. I use a uni knot. Now I'm not going to show you how to do a uni knot because you can simply just look up on the internet. There's plenty of videos that show you how to do a uni knot. The second knot I use is to attach tippet to my tapered leader. For that, I use a simple 3-turn surgeon's knot. It's quick, it's effective, and I find it's quite strong, so I've never had a problem with it. There's plenty of other knots you can try to do this with. I find this a simple knot, especially when your fingers are cold and wet. It's a simple knot to tie and it works very well and it's strong. So that's what I use. So these days, most fly lines have a loop in the end of them. So I use a simple loop-to-loop connection to attach the leader or the tippet material to the fly line. And to form a loop, if there isn't a loop, I just use a figure-of-8 loop knot. Very simple, easy and strong, no problems with it. Gives you a nice straight connection as well, so perfect. That's what I use. So that sums up the knots, rigs and flies that I use for fly fishing for New Zealand trout. I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully I'll bring you some more interesting content in the next video until I can bring you some actual fishing content once we're out of this lockdown. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.